Perlberg. I'm the Executive Director and Senior Counsel for ConsensusDocs. ConsensusDocs is a unique coalition of now more than 40 organizations in the construction industry, and we're dedicated to drafting and publishing best practice standard construction contract documents. We have over 110 standard construction contract documents that we produce and sell. And I'm the lead staff person for the program that we've been around for over 13 years now. Sure. So I'm the lead spokesperson. I'm the staff person who's in charge of writing the contracts with our wonderful member volunteers. And then I oversee our operations with the help of my team. We have a lot of technology needs. We have sales needs. We basically are a non-for-profit business who's dedicated to improving the design and construction industry through better contract practices. But then we're a business to support that effort by having subscriptions to use the contracts on commercial construction projects throughout the United States and the world. So there's really two main parts to it. There's the having the contracts, the content, the substance, the reason why we exist. And then there is the operation supporting that, and the marketing, sales, technology, more mundane things like insurance and management and things of that nature. So for me, I'm probably, as a construction attorney, I probably get more enjoyment from the substance and the overall mission about improving the industry. And the operations, if nobody hears your work, then it doesn't have an impact, but to a certain extent, it's a means to an end. So we have a customized technology platform, a website, and that needs to reach out to the public. It's our storefront. It is also the way that people receive and actually have some added value in the contract negotiation process. And, that is not necessarily our specialty. And we have outside folks who help us with the technology. We know what we want to deliver. We're probably closest to our customers and knowing what they want and hear them. And so we're the business owners to try to figure that out. We want to reach out to the largest audience as possible. And that's the aspect that maybe that's not the reason why we exist. It's more of a means to an end. And sometimes we get some help on executing on that. Of course, we have, generally we have expertise, and then there's things that we can learn, and then there's things that we need to go outside and procure services. And I should mention that I have two roles. I have two jobs that sometimes I'm wearing a different hat. I'm also in-house counsel for construction law for the largest commercial construction association in the country, the Associated General Contractors of America, or more widely known as AGC. And AGC's been around for over 100 years. There used to be, and I used to lead that effort, AGC Contract Documents program. And those documents created a baseline of standard construction contracts. AGC reached out to the rest of the industry and said, hey, instead of it from just our perspective, why don't we try to truly have everybody at the table and come up with the standard that we can all agree on as a better way forward, and that people can then modify for their project-specific needs. So it was a 3-year effort, and that invitation had fits and starts. At one point, it had collapsed, and I actually helped create a new model to make it work that ultimately came to fruition. I actually worked with Pat and PAI to help come up with the name and branding for the initial branding of ConsensusDocs, which happened in September 2007. But like I said, it was a 3-year effort. It's something had never been done before. It was unique. It's the only time in the United States that such a wide, diverse groups that actually in the construction industry are somewhat in competition in other areas for membership and may disagree on certain issues, have come together for something very significant in putting their logo on a construction contract, which at the end of the day for their members determines their substantive rights on projects often. And so setting a different foundation and a different default has really important consequences. And the fact that we could get so many people together to actually agree on this and work together was something that was on the cover of Engineering News Record magazine and continues to be a pretty big deal. And I do remember we had a sort of a placeholder name and some efforts with this, and we needed to have a sophisticated way of coming to market and thinking, how are we going to reach out and make this a big deal? And we looked around for some outside marketing help and chose Pat. And I remember working pretty collaboratively with Pat, and I said, well, we asked our folks, and here's our two leading candidates for our brand recognition of. Some wanted to call it Consensus, and others wanted to call it the Docs. The Docs stand for designers, owners, contractors, and subcontractors. And I just remember what was ultimately the genius idea, but initially had some reluctance for acceptance Pat was like, well, why don't we just combine them both and call them Consensus Docs? And that ultimately won the day. I've known Pat for coming up on 2 decades. I used to be the general counsel and director of government affairs for Design Build Institute of America, mostly at DBIA. And Pat was basically stationed in his office there for a time, and that's how I got to know Pat and saw him in action as an integral part of DBIA. I then left DBIA to come to AGC and then start what now is known as ConsensusDocs, but didn't exist. And when I was at DBA, I saw, while he wasn't a DBIA employee, he was one of the bigger drivers for that organization's financial viability, quite frankly, and strength. And I was amazed by it, and continue to be amazed by what a force that their convention and expo show is. And I know that is a strength that Pat has both helped build and keep up, and that continues. It had continued before I know him, and now it continues. So when I came over to AGC, I've kept in touch with Pat. I actually helped. AGC was struggling with their convention and expo, and made a connection that someone like Pat could help AGC grow what was, again, something that had really become not a priority or wasn't working well, and its financial viability and added to AGC's bottom line was really struggling. And Pat saw the need, and I've seen this from just being in the organization and seeing it from a little bit of a far field, but also seeing it directly at times when I'm at the convention and seeing, wow, amazed of how many. I remember walking ConAg Expo and seeing our portion of it, and maybe I probably was walking with Pat and seeing the tremendous physical presence that occurred that didn't exist before in our expo hall. I've already mentioned about how he helped me in launching ConsensusDocs, but I would say more to the point, what happened during the pandemic. Well, so Pat's part of my network, and so over the years we have grown the ConsensusDocs program. We never had associations are good at creating white papers and best practices. I think we're particularly good at creating work product deliverables, like a standard construction contract, not just sometimes verbal statements and collaboration statements that may or may not lead to action. That being said, I think associations tend to sometimes struggle in operating like a business. And we expanded our operations to have a salesperson. And we had marketing and we had that operations, but we didn't really have somebody beating the pavement. And so we try to expand our operations within our internal team of having a salesperson, really reaching out to, we had kind of worked with vendors in the past. We had tried to work with some folks who would make cold sales calls. And they were in fits and starts, and it wasn't really a sustained effort that was in our sweet spot. And when we went to outside vendors, they didn't understand truly what we were doing and our mission and our business. And so we tried some of those things, and then we cultivated someone internally to take on that role. They didn't necessarily have the experience, and they didn't have the colleagues to help support them, to help with their knowledge. And we gave it a go, and it had an impact. But when we had a change over time, Pat's in my network, and I said, look, how can we structure this so it's really a salesperson? And so we hired a salesperson. And it was a real struggle, even for us through our HR department, of recruiting, because we're used to recruiting through business not-for-profits, trade associations, websites. And so while it was, I think, a good position, good compensation, we were struggling to get someone who was a true salesperson. And what's the model? We don't want to just give that person a salary. So Pat would be someone like, hey, here's how I'm thinking. I want them to have some skin in the game. What do you do? And so I've been I would say that was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And Pat was someone who I would just hammer out some ideas. Here's what I'm thinking. How do you do it? So we've hired a salesperson. And that person had a sort of a tenure with the association. And then they moved on after about 2 years. We hired another salesperson. And we knew that, like, fairly junior level salespeople are going to come and go into other pastures. And so the second time we had it, I had seen that we were a little bit in the hamster wheel. We were doing certain things, we were getting similar results, but we weren't breaking the curve like we feel like we should, because we have a superior. I think we provide a superior product, and it's not just a product, it really represents services of the incredible intellectual property of the volunteers and the system that we've put in place. And we want to break the curve and go up like this, right? And we were seeing growth, but not the growth that I think that we deserve for the tremendous product that I think we have. And so it's like, hey, if you want different, I say in my presentations about our contracts, if you want to get different, if you do the same things over and over again and expect to get different results, that's Einstein said that's the definition of insanity. So I had seen that we were, quite frankly, struggling a little bit with what we were doing, and wanted to started studying, have some conversations, maybe expressing a little frustration too, right? Like, hey, why aren't we doing better? And just as a friend and Pat in my network, I maybe shared some of that thing, and maybe just brainstorming with him. And those conversations led to when we had a need and we had a change, it created an opportunity within a changeover in the salesperson. And rather than hire another salesperson who was probably going to be a little bit junior level, a little bit someone who was in an island in a not-for-profit association with not colleagues internally who could help support them grow as salespeople and and bounce around ideas. There was some limited opportunity for that, but I think we knew that this person was unique within the business not-for-profit. Pat suggested that he could provide a better way forward. And because he had experience of being successful within working with colleagues within AGC, the idea, sometimes things are really hard, ideas are really hard to implement. And I see this both on a substantive, when creating contracts or even doing educational collaborative presentations or webinars. And sometimes things just are hard to actually get implemented, even if they're good ideas. And then other times, good ideas just happen and they're accepted. And while I wouldn't say that it was seamless, and we had to build a system to make the relationship work, and we can talk a little bit about that, because I think that's actually something I'm really happy with the way we collaboratively work together. The idea was readily accepted because of the results Pat has gotten for AGC. And I saw the value from my history of seeing him work at DBIA and AGC and helping me launch my program. While there was some reluctance of going outside for services that going outside in the past hadn't worked because they didn't know our business. And there is certain loss of, you lose certain things when you go out and hire services. Someone's not as close to you. They may not know your business as well. They're not there by your side and physically in your office when we were physically in our offices all the time. And so there may be some other duties as assigned or miscellaneous that you know that you missed, but it's hard to articulate. And so it was with some trepidation, but in knowing that it would lead to better results, I was surprised by, one, how quickly I became comfortable with the idea, and then when I wanted to move in that direction, how quickly other people thought that it was a good idea and it made sense to them in similar but also different ways. The thing that I would actually highlight is probably the thing that's most unique about working with PAI and Pat, because, I was thinking about it this morning in preparation for this conversation, is what I sometimes think of one of the unique ingredients of ConsensusDocs. I mean, we're a coalition of diverse interests within the construction space, and one of the key ingredients is trust. And it's something that I personally take pride in. I'm a straightforward person, and to create a coalition, we have to be professional. But if you don't have trust, you don't have anything. You can't have a relationship. And when we started talking about, well, what would it look like to have PAI as our outside sales force? What would be the structure where it's a true win-win? Because even in our contract, I think about our contracts, right? I maybe have a little tunnel vision and focus on that. There's generally a win-win, win-lose, or there's a win-lose mentality. And sometimes when you work with outside vendors, they're trying to upsell you. They're trying to do something that sounds good, but it's really better for them than for you. And I think sometimes there's a feeling of lack of trust and feeling like you're getting upsold. And I gotta say, in discussing this position, because I even mentioned before how when we were hiring an internal salesperson, I tried to figure out how can we have them have skin in the game. And what was so unique in figuring this out with Pat is I felt total trust with him because I have a relationship with him. And I didn't feel like he was coming up with a proposal in the terms that I was going to have to vet with other people as well. But I could be open and honest and let him know what my goals were and truly collaborate with him in trying to figure out what the best way to get there. And what we came up with were terms that at times I was, quite frankly, wanted to make sure that they were fair enough for him, because I thought something being proposed, I could see that he was taking some risk, and he did something that was unique in that we created together, but it was really, I think, his initial mentality was he wanted us to grow. But it became, after it happened, it becomes our growth, and that it has to continue to happen for him to achieve at a higher level and be compensated at the highest level. So I think it's unique because he's incentivized to help us grow, and then it's not like then it becomes our business, and it's not like a royalty, so to speak. It has to be renewed each year. And so that's really showing that it has to work well for both of us, but it's in a way that really, it's refreshing because I feel like it helps us grow a sustainable business without having somebody who we're tied to or overcompensating with the formula we created or the agreement we created. There's a bit to unpack there. One of the big things for us was, hey, I'm going to hire somebody new. That person's going to take training and to get up to speed both on our program and, quite frankly, how sales work in the standard construction contract document space. And then the depth, right? Like, how do we all work together? And if that person, we have sometimes multiple calls. We have over 1,000 paid subscribers. We have thousands of subscribers. There are times where they're going to be busy, and that means somebody else is not available. So, or they're taking a vacation for a week, right? We all need to renew and have some time off. What was great about hiring PAI is that it's a team approach. We have somebody on our team that actually isn't Pat, who's our primary contact. And I feel like that person, but then we have a team behind her to help us so that there's duplication and that there's support. And so if that person's on vacation, there's someone to step into that seat, and things don't get just totally on hold. And then I also feel like that person has the support and synergy of not just working with us and understanding our business. And they knew that, I guess, because of Pat's experience in the space that is pretty focused and unique, working with me and other people in standard construction contract documents. And how many people can say that and know some of the key players, both customer-wise and sales and support-wise, and things like publications and marketing channels. So it's really worked out well. I mean, I won't lie, there is some time we have to get up to speed, and that was it was quicker than if we had hired ourselves. But there is some getting to know you and working through things that you have to have some time as an owner and a client to do that collaboratively. But we got up to speed much more quickly than we would have at our own. We have different depth, and it's not like the person who is Katie, who's our primary contact. It's certainly like, it's not like she's thrown to the wolves. Pat is integrally involved. He touches base and he's there at the meetings. He is definitely not an arm's length. I know that there's stuff going on behind the scenes between the two of them, but we see Pat as well. But now I also have the confidence that I see the value add that Katie brings, that is a little bit different perspective and set of skills and experience that I hadn't seen before when we had that position internally. But at the same time, we all get along. We have fun with it. I mean, I probably could have said that before. I mean, one of the things that Pat has said about me that I appreciate is he said he's excited to work with us, and he said, you know, you guys, me personally, you make it fun, and that's very rewarding to hear that kind of feedback. But I'd actually say the same thing about Pat and PAI. We can joke with Pat, we can joke with Katie. They're not arm's length outside professional. We feel like they're part of the team, and they bring that mindset. Well, I think we had a good sense of our goals in some ways before talking with Pat, right? And PAI. We know we want to be the most influential standard construction contract document, the most used. We know we want to grow revenue. We know we want to have the funds to support a robust staffing of our documents. I think that what I see PAI do is they help us look at things in meeting those goals in a different way that is helpful, but it's also maybe a little bit different, and it's a little bit more business oriented, and I know that in some ways is, I think we had lots of numbers, we have lots of data points, and sort of how do you shape those? And you know, it's just something standard that Pat does in his contracts that I didn't necessarily ask for, but it was a 90-day review. And in the past, I've hired outside consultants to give us a 90-day look, or a look, I don't know if it was 90 days, but that's what Pat did, was to give us a look under the hood from an outside perspective. How are you doing and how can you do better? And what's interesting is Pat's there helping us implement those suggestions. And then he's using that knowledge and giving us I think a better understanding of how our business works, and then a look that we can, not just some goals to implement and specific tactics, but he's there helping us implement them in a way that an outside consultant that we've used in the past, it's a different feel, right? And then with our structure and agreement we have, he's almost as incentivized, or we're all incentivized to grow. there's absolutely in the recommendations that we've already received and the mentality of when we meet on a weekly basis and talk as cross teams, because they're really part of I don't even think of them as I think of them as part of our team, not our team talking to their team. I don't even think that way. So we talk as a team. I would say we have a communication all the time and every day. And what kind of team do you have if you're not, right? But the numbers and looking at them and setting like, hey, what's your best month ever? What's your best quarter ever? What's an average quarter? The way that the numbers are crunched, it was a different perspective. And I noticed that in reporting those back to others, that even the verbiage and language used in and analyzing them is that we've adopted some of that. And we're looking at a term of, hey, we had a good month, we had a bad month. We had a good month, we had a bad month. Or we had a good month and an okay month, right? And now we're talking about things in terms of quarters as well as months. And that kind of helps smooth out some of the randomness that you have is just hey, what does someone purchase? Was it the last day of the month or the first day of the month? We can't be just subject to the whims of a one day where it falls on the calendar. And then I noticed that Pat has listened to us, and when I say things like, hey, look, you get caught up in how many days are in the month versus how many work days. And now I hear him say that back to us. Oh, we have this many work days. And so I think it's a two-way street too, that they're listening to our experience and then growing their knowledge on it. And then what I really appreciate is there is his personal connections and knowledge about outside people, because if you keep hitting the same people within our sphere and just trying to maximize that, and I think a lot of associations, I think we were really good as ConsensusDocs being a coalition of having a mentality of, look, we're not just hitting our members, and then we have 40 groups, but we're not just trying to hit the members of the 40 groups, right? Like we have because of the value we bring, we have a lot of non-members who use us and use us in a diverse way. And so we've always been conscious of that, right? So I think we're about, it's 50-50 members, non-members who use our contracts. But now with Pat, I feel like it's another dimension of, well, there's these other groups that we can hit, and he already has personal relationships with them. And we had reached out vaguely to some of those different avenues. And already I see that we have, just last week, we had a major outreach and a way to touch people that we hadn't necessarily touched before. And what I like about it is we're treating it as almost like a scientific experience. Okay, we're going to try to do this. We hadn't done this channel before. We're going to see the results. And we worked with somebody else, just like Pat, this other channel, this outside person. It's the same mindset. They're like, hey, let's give it a go and see how it works. And then we'll figure out sort of the compensation package. And that's neat to see. And we're trying to grow the funnel. I mean, I think there's even a visualization in the way that Pat brings to it that's been helpful. We want to, it's not just the same mindset, but we're trying to grow the funnel of who we talk to. And then we're going to be more efficient in closing that funnel so we focus our efforts. And in particular, one of the things that we had struggled with, that we had tried to do, is implement a CRM. And those are initials that 5 years ago I didn't know, but I knew we tried to do this for the past 4 years. We had an outside consultant tell us you really should use a Salesforce type of system CRM. How do you do that? Well, I had a junior level salesperson, and we got recommendations, and we got very little implementation. We tried, we just couldn't do it. Then we tried again, and we bought a CRM and we got a subscription. But it turned out we were more comfortable working off of Excel spreadsheets. So when we went to Pat and when we were starting this conversation, we were both in violent agreement. We got to get more sophisticated. We need a better infrastructure to work through our prospects and work through our customers and retain our customers and grow our prospects. And that was part of the agreement. And I really see working with them that they've taken ownership in that, and I said, I want you as our sales force, the people who are touching our clients, I really want you guys to make recommendations and own that, because on a day-to-day basis. But I also want to have that conversation. And we have worked in a short amount of time really hard on coming up with a plan that has, quite frankly, been a little painful to get to really kind of, but for some internal struggles, and this is new for us to really understand as an association how we really want to use a CRM, and what CRM and what fields and at what level, and we don't want to get oversold on it from the outside CRM vendors. And you know, we are moments away from signing the agreement for implementation with the connection that Pat helped develop with a key vendor who I think is going to work out great, who has gotten great feedback. And I think it's at a cost point that's very advantageous. That is, again, this is a different way of operating. And I think I'm very confident that both that it's going to work, and that PIA is going to own it in the implementation phase, and make sure that we also own it, and we all have we're all invested in the shared success of it. I think that that's one of the things that attracted us to working with PAI is the knowledge within the space, and for us, while that's not his focus, or his sweet spot is probably the expo space within that and the connections that he has. He even had experience with our particular scope of the world of construction and legal contract documents. And so it's complicated. I mean, I would just say for standard construction contracts in the design and professional space, there is a diversity of interest groups and a diversity of way people make decisions on purchases, right? Some people are very cost motivated, but many people in the space are not. And how do you influence and stay in touch with them and be relevant to them when they are making their decisions? It's still, in some ways, it's complicated and multifaceted, and to a certain extent, I would say that it's still a work in progress, right? I don't think there's a one golden magic egg. So you have to focus on what works and leverage that, but to a certain extent, you have to take an all of the above approach to a certain degree to reach those diverse interests and the way that different people think within there. Pat knows the space and he knows the players, and I think the thing for me is that he's able to, I have a lot of connections, and through our 40 organizations, we have an incredible network of not just thousands, but hundreds of thousands of individuals and companies. That being said, we can't just hit the same people. And I think that Pat's bringing us a mentality of widening the funnel of people we touch, which I'm very interested in. And so he's able to make connections in the AE space that include design professionals and builders and owners. And owners is everybody who owns the capital asset of a commercial construction project. And it's just refreshing to have somebody who can know the language, know the space, and then make connections, rather than me tell them, oh, you need to hit owners. And that if you get the owners, then you get the contractors. And if you get the contractors, you get the subcontractors. And if you get the subcontractors, you get the subcontractors and suppliers. And then you have your influencers, right? Your attorneys. Pat gets that. I don't have to explain it to them. And then he can make the connections with other marketing channels, with other relationships that I didn't have as much. Or he's asking me, hey, look, within your network, who should I be talking to? Who's underutilized? And what I noticed in the 6 months that we've been under this engagement is we've seen more results. I mean, there's things that we've talked about, but he provides a little extra oomph. I call it like when you're on a 4-cylinder car and you have a turbocharge and you go a little faster. I kind of feel like we get a little bit of a turbocharge, that I see some of those connection points that he knows are valuable. He's emphasizing those a little bit more, and we're getting some results that I like from those. So one of our key associations, I mean, I think I mapped it out. I'm like, oh, well, that group, you know, does a lot for us, but they could do even more. And I've already seen the homepage of their website totally refreshed. And it wasn't even necessarily something Pat did with us or for us, but it was in those conversations of me saying, hey, who else is underutilized and how can we utilize them? And already they've totally redone their website, and it now emphasizes ConsensusDocs. And when I do a Google search, I know that in the last week, that's one of the most relevant things that comes up. And that's even something that's just come from the conversations that's more indirect than direct. Well, I mean, I think that the 90-day recommendations was pretty eye-opening. Just the way the numbers were crunched, and some of it was a little bit of a different flavor. Some of it was stuff for us to explore. So we're now looking at really better using Google Analytics and search engine optimization. That's always been on our roadmap, but I think that in some of the tidbit of information we got, it's getting higher level of effort and sort of labor and more on our end from some of the things that we can leverage. So, yeah, one is I just think that I feel like the energy on our team, having them embedded as an outside resource to turbocharge our efforts, is working. I feel that I also feel like we're getting smarter on what's working well or what we're hitting our head against the wall and what we need to do differently. So, I mean, I just feel the level of effort and work products and services that we're doing collectively as a team is we're getting better and smarter and getting more out of our fruits. And then I see the breadcrumbs of future efforts. I guess what I think of as PAI is maybe the value proposition that's probably different than most vendors that outside vendors that I've worked with is, and I wouldn't say that that's maybe true of all vendors. I mean, I don't want to castigate everybody else I've worked with, right? But I think it's unique that there's trade associations. I think that this is PAI's concept and unique value proposition is when I was looking for a salesperson in the past and going through our normal channels, I realized while our mission is to improve the industry, we need to have business operations and marketing and sales to support those larger aims. And we need to be as good as any business, even though we're a pretty small team, we're a micro business. And so that is hard, I think, for most associations. And I think that PAI is unique in bridging the gap between taking a larger mission and trying to improve an industry and getting the entrepreneurial mentality and resources of a business that deals in black and white and marry both of those, getting the best of both worlds. I think that's the unique value proposition that I feel that I've felt and seen working with PAI and Pat.